Hello. My name is Rick Casale, and I'm a trustee of Carbon Copy, and I'll be your host for this online event. Welcome to my guest speakers, and welcome to you, our audience. This event series is all about inspiration and action, and what kind of collective local action we can take to address the immediate environment and climate crisis. This week, we focus on local renewable energy, and importantly, on how communities are at the forefront of this fundamental shift. Just a few quick housekeeping details before we get started. The event's being recorded, and we'll send you a link after the event. The microphones are turned off and cameras are turned off, except for our guest speakers. There's a chat and a Q&A on the right-hand side of your screen. Chat is for our audience, just to chat amongst themselves. And the Q&A is for asking questions of our guest speakers. And please, if you have questions, start sending them to us as soon as you can. It'll give us more time to collate them, and we'll have a Q&A session at the end. Our first guest will set the stage, and then our other speakers will bring community energy to life by sharing their experiences and their specific initiatives. So let's just jump straight in, and let me introduce to you our guests. First, we have Emma Bridge. Emma is the CEO of Community Energy England, a not-for-profit organisation set up to provide a collective voice for the community energy sector in England. Emma's experience in sustainable development spans public, private and community sectors, and includes a prior role as General Manager of Sheffield Renewables. She currently sits on a number of national energy advisory groups and on expert panels for 3 EU community energy projects. Welcome, Emma. I think Emma's coming on board now. Chris Coonick is the Technical Director of Waybridge Renewable Energy Network. She has extensive experience of solar PV technologies and on the design and practical delivery of solar power and hybrid energy systems. She works for the government's Innovation and Research Agency, Innovate UK, supporting businesses to develop next-generation technologies. Chris is also a STEM ambassador for Cornwall, encouraging women into engineering roles. Welcome, Chris. Mike Ford is the Technical Director of Whitby-esque Energy. He became a founder member of this venture in order to commission, build and run a community-owned hydro turbine near Whitby. As a strong advocate of education and learning, Mike worked on their peer mentoring project to support other community groups and currently works with teaching establishments to use the turbine for educational purposes. He's a recipient of the UK Community Energy Awards Green Energy Champion. Welcome, Mike. Agamemnon Otero is founding director of Repowering London, Brixton Energy, and Energy Garden. He also co-founded Community Energy England and sits on the government's Community Energy Contact Group, advising on community energy policy. He's been recognised with an MBE for services to community energy, made a London leader, and named as one of the 51 most impactful green leaders globally by the CSR Congress. Welcome, Agamemnon. Now, hopefully, I just need to check. Emma, are you with us? Can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear and see you all okay. Can you not see me?
That's great. Hear me? Can hear you fine. It's just that your screen's frozen at the moment, but that's fine if we can hear you and we've got your slides. So if we could start with you, please. And before we jump into some specific community energy projects that the others will share, could you set the stage for us and share some of the challenges and the opportunities of the community energy sector as a whole?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just going to try to turn my screen off. So apologies, you won't be able to see me, but it might just help with the reception a little bit.
Okay.
Let's see if that works.
We can see your slides.
Okay, so yeah, are the slides there?
Yes, thanks.
Brilliant. Okay, so Rick has already covered who Community Energy England is, but I thought it might just be worthwhile just very quickly covering some of the background to why we were formed. So we were formed 5 years ago now by a group of practitioners, really to provide a strong, unified voice.
Emma, we've lost you. Let's just wait 1 second, see if we can get her back again. Tell you what we'll do is, Mike, if you're okay, maybe Chris, can I jump to you? So what we were going to do, and I'm going to mix it up a little bit. Hopefully Emma can sort out her presentation in the background while we continue on. But Emma was basically going to set the stage for us. And then we were going to jump into 3 examples of what people have actually done on the ground, their experiences with it, and some of the learnings that we get from it. And so, Chris, I was going to ask you about Waybridge Renewable Energy Network and this notion of community empowerment, which is really fundamental to this whole sector. What does it look like from your perspective in terms of some of the initiatives that you have already done and some of the ones that you're thinking about doing?
Yeah, absolutely. Good afternoon, everyone. And thank you, Rick and Heather, for inviting me to speak today. I really appreciate it. So with Waybridge Renewable Energy Network, I have only joined the organisation in the last sort of 2 or 3 years, but I'm very aware of the long history before I started. So we have the challenge of £14 million is spent per year in Waybridge on energy, and for a town of about 10,000 people, that's a really big number. So REN established itself in 2011 on the simple proposition that localising our energy economy would produce substantial benefits to the town, including greater economic resilience, improved quality of life, enhanced future job prospects for our children, and a step towards reducing our impact on the climate. So REN really wanted to advance education and raise awareness of energy resource scarcity and low carbon living. And we wanted to promote individuals, communities and organisations' commitment to reduce carbon emissions whilst providing a sustainable means of achieving economic development and regeneration. So initially we set up an energy shop, and that was key for our community outreach. It gave us a space where REN could play a key role in our community, supporting members of the public and giving impartial advice and support, especially to those who needed it most. It helped us build the community's confidence in us, providing tangible benefits to a wide range of people and showing that we weren't just a bunch of greenies trying to convert everyone to a carbon-free religion. We installed over 100 or so energy monitors in homes. We supported 380-ish consumers to switch energy supplies and adopt energy efficiency measures. And then in 2012, REN launched its community fund. So this was a fund that was designed to award monies to local community groups each year. And it was so successful, we now administer community funds for other organisations as well, most of which have been put in place to satisfy Section 106 planning clauses. So that includes 2 local solar farms and a wind farm, providing REN with essentially a role in delivering key community benefits for the next 20 years. And over the years, REN has distributed nearly £350,000 in grants to over 220 local community groups. Another pivotal point that really we truly embedded ourselves within our community was to show that we were there for the long term was in 2013 when we ran the Waybridge Energy Futures exhibition. This had been designed to engage local people in a discussion about the sustainable options available to us and the merits of greater energy self-sufficiency. We had over 500 people attend, and we gained real strong approval for greater ownership and control over our energy supply. We digitalised that exhibition, so you guys can have a look at it. It's on our website at the moment, and it will stay there forever. And with that, we then went on to set up a procurement scheme that offered economies of scale for those who wanted to invest in low carbon technologies. That led to about 1.2 megawatt of solar PV being installed, a megawatt of biomass systems, 150 insulated homes. And that represented £2 million in capital to our local renewable energy installer network. In addition, we think that we influenced an additional 3 megawatts of renewable energy installations outside of our town. And in 2015, the BBC actually reported that around 500 homes in Waybridge have solar on their roofs. That's nearly 10% of the homes in our town. And they said we were a contender for the solar power capital of the UK. Well, now we've got more houses and the solar rush slowed down a bit, so we might have lost that accolade to somewhere else in the UK, but it was absolutely brilliant to have it at the time. In 2015, we then moved on and we set up Waybridge Energy Company and built out the Nanstallen solar array, which powers a local sewage treatment plant. Besides offering a strong and practical expression of what local control of energy means, it also gave Wren the first experience of setting up the legal side of owning and operating a renewable energy asset on someone else's land and selling energy to a third party. And we have lots of lessons learned about that. And with this experience, we were more determined than ever to set up a local energy market so we could leverage some of that £14 million of energy spend in our community. We ran a domestic demand side response trial called the Sunshine Tariff. It was a collaboration between Wren, Western Power Distribution, Tempest Energy and Regen. It offered local consumers the opportunity to buy and use cheap electricity at peak solar generation times. And the aim was to evaluate whether shifting the demand for solar power generated could be a practical remedy for the constraints on the local grid network that we have here in Cornwall. It was ahead of its time back in 2015 and has become an important part of a growing body of evidence about the flexible and personally tailored use of energy. Now we're looking at energy equality in our community and whether we can help alleviate fuel poverty and provide a market for new renewable energy assets post-feed-in tariff to sell energy direct to consumers through a peer-to-peer trading platform, essentially allowing us to keep the benefit of locally generated energy in the community rather than sort of exporting it outside. So Wren, we've really had to remain an agile organisation to face the challenges that have been presented around fluctuating policy and moving goalposts. And we estimate that we completed around 2,800-ish support activities to individuals in our community. It's been a continual evolution for us, and we're fortunate that the attitudes and support of our community has evolved with us. And now the Waybridge Town Council has actually declared its own climate emergency at the end of last year. So with over 1,200 members in our network, Wren's policies are representative of our local opinion, but we've always strived to make replicable models and have published our learnings for others to use and adapt. So yeah, it's not always simple or easy, but it's definitely worthwhile. And yeah, embedding your community in the plans that you do is absolutely critical and key to that.
Chris, thank you very much. I would encourage everybody to actually go and have a look at some of the things that Wren are doing, because there's so much innovation coming out of your network. And I think there's a whole lot more that people can learn and discover. So thank you very much. That was an excellent overview.
No problem.
To give you a sense of the variety of community-led projects, and Wren, there's a lot going on even just within that one network. But let me bring in Mike next to talk about a hydroelectric turbine on the River Esk near Whitby. Mike, if you could, in addition to talking about the scheme itself, one of the things that you do, and I know you're passionate about, is promoting education and more learning and training about community energy. So if you can also touch upon that point, that would also be really helpful for our audience. Thank you.
Hi, welcome everybody. Again, thanks for the opportunity to talk and let you know what we've been doing up in North Yorkshire in the wilds near Whitby. I've got to stretch my memory back to the beginning of this, because we date back to 2006 when the parish council had a brainwave to try and speculate how we could reduce the carbon footprint of the Esk Valley, and that's the main river within the North York Moors National Park at the north end. So they got in touch with the National Park Authority, and they decided to fund some resource to help bring communities together to discuss how that could be achieved. So we had a lot of support from the park in terms of facilitation, and we initially got together and offered advice around insulation, either use less energy to start with, and then we progressed to organising presentations by manufacturers, installers of renewable energy and insulation materials in order to get people switched on to the concept of using less and using green. We then thought, what can we do next? And that progressed down to how can we actually generate our own renewables within the park. We initially looked at wind power, and that didn't go down too well with the park, having lollipops scattered about the park with turbines on them. Having said that, they are actually allowing them at low levels, which isn't very good for generating, but there are some in the park. Anyway, we moved on and thought, well, we've got the river, can we do hydro? So we commissioned a survey of all the existing weirs on the river to see where we could generate electricity and where it would be feasible to do so. And fairly quickly honed in on the most downstream weir right next to Whitby as it goes into the estuary. The basis being there's the most water there because it's the whole of the catchment. And it also benefited by we had a friendly landowner that we could access, and we weren't too far from the grid connection, which are the main key drivers behind getting a good location. So we're now up to about 2007, 8. So we start going through the process of working out what we should do, how we should do it. And again, a lot of support from the park in looking at other schemes, both private and community, although there weren't very many community ones about at that stage. So we then commissioned some quotes to get installed system, and also talked to the Environment Agency about how we could get an abstraction license, which is rather bizarre. Because we don't actually abstract water, we take it in at the top end and put it straight back again at the bottom. But they needed to be involved to make sure that we weren't chopping up fish, which seemed to be the major scare story of the era. And they initially were quite resistant to the idea, but did actually come round when their whole ethos was changing away from just ecology to environment. And they were also conscious of needing to have reduced carbon within the atmosphere. So they did actually come on board and actually quite a supporter of us. So we're quite grateful to the Environment Agency down the road. They did actually a 5-year study before and after we installed, looking at the transit of fish over the weir, or around the turbine over the weir. And it looks like we're slightly better off now having the turbine than we were before, so that's good news. That's also part of the research and education, which I'll touch back on later. So having got a traction license, talked to the distribution network operator, Northern Power Grid. Big issues with them. They really didn't understand the concept of generating on basically as a load-only network at that time. But we managed to get them on board, and we got a grid connection after a lot of negotiation. The landowner was always very, very supportive of what we were trying to do. So we've got space adjacent to the weir rather than in the weir. And we also found some money to renew the fish pass, which was already there, to make that an improved fish pass. So that brings us to about 2011. At the beginning of 2012, we placed an order for the turbine, and we commissioned at the end of 2012, only about a month behind schedule, but we're on budget. So 2012, great. A lot of effort by the whole group. One of the key factors, I think, of our success was that within the like-minded people within the S, we managed to get hold of a really good skill base of motivated people, from accountants, architects, tax lawyer, planning officer, engineers, both civil and mechanical. So we had a really good cross-section of skills that could tackle all of the issues. And in particular, we had a person doing administration as well, so they could keep up with all the issues that were coming and going. So we're all kept together and we all kept going in the right direction. During that time, we had a lot of changes within government, unfortunately, in terms of granting structure, the feed-in tariff coming in, and I don't know what preceded it now, but anyway, we had to change our funding structure 3 times during the course of our development. In the end, we ended up with a mix of loans and a share issue, about 50-50 roughly. The National Park also managed to translate one of their grant structures into a loan structure so that we didn't fall foul of state aid rules. And in fact, that has turned out to be one of the best decisions that was made along the way, because what that means is both our capital and revenue that we're paying back on that loan go back into the park as part of a sustainable growth within the park. So we're basically reusing, and they're reusing the grant money that they would have given to us themselves. So that really worked out well. Okay, so now we've got to 2012 and we're commissioned. It's a whole new mindset because you've then got to operate the thing. So people who are really enthusiastic about building it, you think, well, what are we going to do now? We've just got to run the thing. So we soon realized that we needed to make sure that we still engaged with our community and the world at large. So we put a lot of effort into education, research, and getting people down on site to have a look at it, to try and motivate them to go into, say, engineering qualifications or whatever. And to that end, 2 of our group who did have a background in education produced some Key Stage 2 teaching materials and used the site as a resource to that end. We've also done some work on A-level studies, and we were in physics review earlier this year as a centerfold. Found that shown on the image above, the water power image there. And the Key Stage 2 was along the top there. One of our group on the top left, if you look, had made a model Archimedes screw, and if you pour water in the top, it lights up lights. So it actually shows the relationship between putting water in and getting electricity out. And that went down very well. It still does. We've also...
Mike, sorry if I can just, because there's way more that you would like to share that unfortunately we have time for. Could you please, just in the interest of the other guest speakers, there's some key things between where you are now and to date that you would just like to share by way of rounding off, and then we will come back to you, I think, in the Q&A.
Yeah, I was actually just rounding off because the education is all about succession planning to make sure we can get new people to come in, and that is the key message that I would want to put to people who achieve these projects. You've got to make sure that you can carry on running them and involve your community once you've commissioned.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Thank you. And let's come back to you, hopefully with time at the Q&A. Do we have Emma back with us? I thought if we do, it'd be quite nice to take a step back from listening to 2 very exciting projects and get a bit of an overview of the sector as a whole. So Emma, if I can turn it over to you, welcome.
Hi, can you hear and see me now?
Yes, we can see your slides. Yes, thank you.
Okay, fantastic. Sorry, I have swapped over to a very old clunky laptop, so which the trackpad doesn't work, but as long as you can hear me, then that's the main thing. I will very, very quickly run through my slides with having taken up a bit of time logging on and off. Very, very quickly, just start with just a little bit background to Community Energy England. Just really to explain where I'm coming from and where our members are coming from. So our vision is that people are put at the heart of the energy system. And our mission as an organisation is to support and accelerate the transition to a fair, low carbon and community-led energy system. So we were set up about 6 years ago now, I think, by a group of practitioners. And our core function is to provide a strong, unified voice for community energy, for community organisations developing energy projects. So we do this mainly around advocating and influencing policy regulation funding regimes, connecting groups and collaborating with private and public sectors, and gathering data and using that to inform not only our activities and our members' activities, but identifying risks, opportunities, sharing learning, and so on. And we really do that with the support of our 250 plus strong membership base, and working very closely with a range of networks such as the Climate Coalition, Cooperatives UK, and many others, a few of which are on the bottom of my slide. So moving on, I think we've already kind of skipped ahead to this, past this a little bit, but I thought it was still worth just very quickly mentioning what we mean by community energy. Community energy brings people together to take democratic climate action by understanding, generating, owning, using, and saving energy. You've already heard from Chris and Mike, so you can see that there's very different ways of doing community energy, and the pictures on this slide are a range of activities that our members undertake. So we have solar PV, energy efficiency, energy advice, wind, working with schools, local authorities, heat, apprenticeships and skills bases. One of the photos there from Repowering, which I will be talking about shortly. But whatever type of activity we undertake, at the heart of it is that community leadership, community ownership, accountability and benefit. So it's really that core that makes us different from other types of energy activity. So moving on, this next slide and the next couple are really taken from our fourth State of the Sector report, which we published, I think, last month. It's a very overview, these slides that are given, but if you do want more information, Carbon Copy are posting a link, and there's a link in the last slide as well. So this shows community energy activity up to the previous year, so in this case 2019. So we found 300 community energy organisations. Now there are a lot more community organisations out there doing energy, but we very much focused on community organisations set up primarily to do energy projects, just simply because trying to capture meaningful data on all the rest of the types of organisations would have been incredibly difficult. So from those organisations, we found that most of the activity was around electricity generation. So just under 200 megawatts of community-owned electricity generation capacity in England, Wales and Northern Ireland. Much less activity around heat. Now this is due partly to the complex nature of heat, but also the long lead-in time. So it's a real area of interest for a lot of our members now, and you will see increasing activity on this, but it's yes, a lot behind the type of activity that we do around electricity. Energy efficiency is obviously very important as well, and so we found 100 community organisations within our survey doing energy efficiency, engaging 234,000 people since our first survey, and providing 28,000 energy efficiency improvements and upgrades. Community energy is also very much leading on technological and social innovations. So you can see there 39 community-led energy storage projects and 47 communities looking at electric vehicles, infrastructure, community car clubs, and so on. And all of that does go to tackling climate change. So 95% of our members are motivated by tackling climate change. And so all of those activities I've just run through has prevented 65,200 tonnes of CO2. So moving on to the next slide, please. And this is really just to flag the range of benefits that come from community energy. So for us, what we do is energy, but it's why we do energy is quite different. So there's a real emphasis there on a broad spread of economic benefits, social benefits and environmental benefits. So things like we proactively give grants and loans to other community organisations trying to do the same things as we do. We also have specific community benefit funding that's according to local need. Resilience and capacity building is really important for us in terms of a really good example is actually at the beginning of coronavirus. Many of our members responded incredibly quickly to set up advice lines, to check on vulnerable people in a socially distant way, and also spent a lot of money on food banks and different ways to help that local community. So for us, it's very much about that broader community resilience as well. And then environmental benefits isn't just CO2. So a lot of our members look at things like bees and wildflowers and wildlife habitats and how their projects can help that broader sustainability as well. And then the next slide. So that's not to say that it is easy necessarily. It's definitely worthwhile, but it's definitely not easy. So we found a range of barriers in our survey. The closure of the feed-in tariff did affect many organisations. So for those of you who don't know what the feed-in tariff is, it's essentially a subsidy from government for anyone generating renewable energy, and that has now closed. So a lot of our business models around electricity generation was very much based on that model, which was very replicable, quite easy to understand, and ensured that we had a surplus that could be paid back into the local community. However, there is a lack of consistency and uncertainty around policy, which has made it very difficult to build alternative long-term plans. And there's a lot of activity at the moment looking at what our new business models can be to make sure that energy is still having that extra positive local impact. Other barriers were around organisation capacity and time, very much related to the sector's reliance on volunteers, but there are more paid opportunities now in the sector as well. And so we also looked at what sort of support was needed. So we've been doing a lot of work into looking at the greater understanding of the time, expertise and capacity demands of the sector, and really trying as part of this to make sure that we are not so reliant on the whims of government. So if we are more resilient and we are looking at a range of different types of support mechanisms there. We have information on all those sorts of activities on our website if you are interested more on the policy side. And next, please. So very quickly, that was setting a scene of where we are now, and this is looking ahead to where we can get to. So also last month, we published our vision for community energy, which we developed in partnership with our members. And our vision is an energy system that is democratic, decentralised and decarbonised, and where people are at the heart of the transition. And really, that's, as far as I'm concerned, not something that you can particularly argue with. But what is particularly powerful is that we found, with help to data provided by WPI Economics, that in 10 years' time, we could be between 12 and 20 times bigger than we are now. We could be contributing over 5,000 megawatts, powering 2.2 million homes, supporting 8,700 jobs, saving 2.5 million tonnes of CO2 emissions, and adding £8.1 billion to the economy. So we really want to see any community, wherever you are based, being able to have that opportunity and access to develop community energy projects to get those benefits. And then just to finish off, the next slide, please. So if you are new or actually have already done community energy but are looking at what's next, we have a range of support and resources on there. We'll also be working with Carbon Copy to support the great work that they're doing to connect local communities, councils and companies. All of those links there are open to anyone who, regardless of whether you're a member or not. If you are just setting up and looking at community energy, then please do join us. We don't charge anyone who's just setting out. So it's just more about accessing our movement and our communities and really bringing this together and making sure that we have a strong voice when we're negotiating with the government and others. And then I think the last slide is just contact details. So if anyone does want any more information, please do get in touch. And hopefully that kind of sets a scene for community energy and where we're looking to go as well. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Emma. And I look forward to bringing you back for the Q&A just after we hear from Agamemnon. Are you there, Agamemnon? I think we seem to have lost him for a little bit. What we might do then is, as and when he comes back, Emma, we'll try and just switch over to him. Oh, he's leaping back in as I speak now. Let's give him a second. Hi there. You're back again. I was just about to switch to you, if I may. We've heard from Emma, and we've also heard from places as far-flung as Cornwall and Whitby. And now possibly we're going to get a London perspective, although your perspective is obviously much, much broader. So you've co-founded a number of community energy initiatives that are revitalizing London communities. It would be great if we could hear some of the challenges that you've overcome in doing so, and also some of the opportunities that others could take. So if we still have you, the floor is yours.
how's my sound? Is it good?
Can hear you now. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah.
Perfect. So my name is Agamemnon Otero, and as Rick said, it's been an amazing process of going through all these different journeys to get here today, and I think the biggest journey is really building trust, and it's something what I wanted to sort of highlight. Many of you are working diligently in your community energy project, and you're trying to make it happen, and others of you might not have a community energy project and are thinking about where to go. And I think the major thing to recognize is trust building. Mike highlighted the ability of being able to tap into the local community and have someone who was savvy with technical, with legal, with planning in the council. Those are all really necessary parts to build trust in. You have to have all these trusted partners. But in your home and in your neighborhood, you need to have that trust. And I think that was one of the biggest things that we found in London was lacking. As someone who grew up in New York City, my grandfather was a policeman. On the beat, you always had to go and make sure that you were a trusted voice, or no one would let you know what was going on. And I feel like that was the real key for the work that I was very lucky to be a part of in 2010 and 11 when we first started working in Brixton, and that was really about going into the streets of the local housing estates and working with the council to develop and build trust. And there wasn't enough trust. We had multiple homicides. We had people whose homes were, drafty, and people were dying of cold. It was very sort of the coal face of fuel poverty in the East Brixton, sort of where it meets Loughborough, was a very clear front line for a lack of trust. And we did, as Mike had highlighted, and I think Christina was highlighting, was that we had an assortment of amazing people that all came together. And I think every community project that has been successful across the country had such a group come together. But what I really want to highlight today to you guys is the trust that is built with communities, especially if you're trying to go outside of your immediate community, is one that takes time, and it takes love, and it takes a sense of nourishment. And I would say there's no way around bringing food and movement and art into getting people creative and saying, what is it that we want, and asking that question. And then community energy can be a medium for delivering social change and behavior change. So to see a reduction in energy usage and a transition from a council, coal-hungry direction, or a profiteering public or private sector initiatives can be resolved by having that trust in the community to both have a platform to listen and a platform to then deliver. And I've had injunctions put on myself to not go onto roofs, onto train tracks. We've had counselors, to politicians, to organizations, to companies try to step in the way of development of plans. Not to mention what you've all highlighted was the government changed. Not only did they change direction, and staff members, they changed their policy. I worked on the community energy strategy in 2013 and 2014, the energy market reform bill in 2012, 2013, and even working across government, we ran into challenges. But the real challenge that I think is the most important to highlight to you guys is trust development, and there is no way to extend community energy out into ethnic diversity. I really feel that we have a very middle class white demographic in community energy. And in 2012-11, when I began working in community energy, it was particularly male. Now we have a real insurgence of women, and it's fantastic that we can now say that there's, at least I would say, we're probably 50-50, if not 60-40. Emma, you can back me up on that. It's definitely, we now are more gender balanced than we've ever been before, but we have a real discussion around ethnic diversity that needs to happen for the for us as a sector. And we have to put our ears to the ground. And I would say that developing listening in community energy is one of the most profound things, and our systems for listening get clogged up because we're focused on the technical side of things and whether or not there's solar panel permissions and oh, it's heat, or do we have distribution? Have we worked out the power purchase agreement? Will the corporates buy social power purchase agreements to deliver these things? Can take up so much time that we forget that the joy of coming together for a meeting should be around food, should be around growing things. And when you do that, it builds and it really nourishes the roots of what I believe we're all doing here, which is well-being. So, I mean, I can put some things into the screen here. You can you can check out Repowering, repowering.org.uk, or Brixton Energy was where we started the model of community energy on social housing, where Greg Barker and Ed Davey were shaking hands in 2013 on the first inner city community-owned renewable energy project on social housing, all the way to the first blockchain energy trial that we did on Bannister House. I know that some of the incredible audience that we can't see, and I wish we could all see you guys, are calling in from Bannister House, which is the first blockchain energy trading trial on a social housing block in 2017, with organizations, all the way to people who are calling in from Brixton, who live in Elmore House, who are working with us on EDF on a energy trading trial there. And as well, I think you can check out energygarden.org.uk, where I really feel a lot of my attention has been going, because it pulls myself away from community energy as a localized one estate or one project, and is to a multi-pronged force to delivering large-scale social change. So Energy Garden is working with 127 community groups across 34 gardens, working with schools, hospitals, housing estates to deliver and develop those food on top of renewable energy. So you can look those up yourself, and I'm not here to talk to you about that today. I would say today my biggest thing is to talk about trust and listening. And if we talk about those things as our fundamentals, I think we can really nourish and grow community energy.
Thank you so much. That was really enjoyable to listen to you. And three very striking and different examples from yourself, Mike and Chris, and yet also some striking similarities in terms of the ability of renewable energy as a force for social change, community empowerment, community benefit funding. I mean, it's quite breathtaking what you can do through this vehicle. Emma, I wonder if, from what you've heard and given your overview of the entire sector, if you wouldn't mind seeing if some of the questions from the audience and or questions that you might have for the guest speakers yourself. We have about 10 minutes. Would you like to jump in and see if there's one or two questions you'd like to share with the panelists?
Sure. So I think one of the most popular ones, one that's probably relevant to most people dialing in, will be around that practical advice of how to get started. So how do you start from a small community with interest but limited time through volunteers and so on, to getting to that stage of setting up a financially viable option, generating revenues? I'll just answer on the preferred legal structure is generally community benefit societies. I would recommend using that vehicle to start out first, and I can signpost some more information about that, but really looking at the practical advice. Maybe starting with Chris, what was your advice for when you first kind of were setting out?
Yeah, well, I'd probably say talk to Community Energy England first, as you guys have loads of great sort of self-help guides. There's also part of the cooperative run a thing called the Hive, and they provide lots of free support that can help sort of budding new organisations get off the feet. But we found that it was kind of, it was a call to action. It just took a few friends talking, in the pub one day to say, this isn't right, we should be doing something about it. And they were like, well, if we're thinking like that, then others might be too. And it was kind of, that is the wonder of social media these days. You can really get a good call for action coming along, and then bringing those sort of like-minded people together and saying, right, what should we do about it? As Agamemnon was saying, it's full of love. Everyone has a passion to do the same thing. And I think it's really just sort of finding people within your community, not only with the passion and the drive, but the right sort of skill sets. We were very lucky in Waybridge and at Ren to have somebody who was an accountant, somebody who was a legal expert, somebody who was good with numbers and figures, somebody with technology backgrounds in renewables. We had people who were experienced in marketing, and it just took. They all had one thing in common, in the fact that they wanted to make Waybridge a better place to live in, but they each individually had their own skill sets as well, and I think that really helped it with us.
Great, thanks, Chris. Mike, have you anything to add to that? I know hydro is a particularly difficult technology to progress, but what about some of the more general learnings?
Yeah, well, certainly in the terms of the general learning, if I look back to how we started out, I think the main thing that got us going really quickly was support from the National Park, because they organised a meeting space for us, some funds for teas and coffees, to go and see other installations, and also, if you like, for want of a better word, some sort of organisational, secretarial, back office support for doing little bits of research for us. Now, when we first started out, we sort of peaked at about 30 people turning up. I mean, I think 80% of them were there for the tea and biscuits, but that's great. People actually turned out, and it was good, and we had good debates. Over time, that distilled down to about 8 people, really hardcore, wanting to go ahead and do it. But it's trying to get people together. And also, don't forget, we're in a rural environment here, so getting people together isn't that easy because of the distance between people. So if you can find some organisation to support you, that would be great, I think.
Great, thanks, Mike.
CE definitely joined, because the Practitioner Forum, Lumio, great resource for people coming in or even already doing it in terms of questions, so I would support that too.
Oh, thank you. Aga, I'm going to put a different question to you, just in view of how much time we've got left. It's a question here from Julie about, she lives in a flat, and obviously sharing resources is quite difficult. There's a lot of barriers. I know Repowering, you mentioned briefly Bannister House and some of the other projects. Could you just explain a little bit about how someone could start to look at a shared resource on a block of flats for community energy?
Sure. Can you hear me, or do I need to?
Yeah.
Not now, no. That's it.
Yeah, no.
There. Good. So, sorry, you said explain how people can get involved with a blockchain project. Is that what you said? No.
Yes, yeah. On like a very basic level. So for people who are living in flats who still want to do community energy.
Oh, people living in flats. Okay, absolutely. Well, I put to the right well, it's not to the right, but it's in the chat box, community energy, the blockchain trials that we were doing. But I think people in social housing, there's a really great opportunity to do that, because you are usually having a communal supply that's paid for by the council. So the number one thing is to get together with your community already. You might have a transition group, or you might have some organization, your TRA, RSL, that you already have. Get together with them, talk about the things that are important to you. I'd use food and say to everybody, don't talk about energy, don't talk about solar panels, talk about, what was it, Leela had just highlighted, the importance of ethnic diversity. Say, look, let's start there. We want some funding to get people into employment. We want people to do those things. Get everybody together for something that means something to the community. Start as that as your launch pad, and then say, we can work with sustainability. What do we need to do? we're looking for someone who knows solar, we're looking for someone who knows something else, then you come together in a group and it will organically start to move. And this is where what Mike and Christina were highlighting was go to someone that's bigger than you, an organization. It doesn't have to be a community energy group. I am not saying don't go to Community Energy England. I'm saying go straight to Community Energy England. But also there'll be a park, there'll be the council, there'll be a large housing trust or a charity. Work with them directly because they need to have people on the ground who are listening and who are speaking the truth. And then as a partnership, then you can start to get there. And all of the advice and the technical stuff exists. There is nothing we can't do now in the sector. But what everybody's struggling to do is to come together and to have a clear voice for what it is they want. And if they can say, we want funding to come into, I'll use Leela's example, we want funding to come into Bannister House because we want to address the gang violence and the lack of socioeconomic mobility. We would like to put solar panels on our roof to fund that. The council will get out of their way to pave the road for you. That's what we have to have clarity. So that's what I would say. Use all the resources that are available to you, and don't be afraid to go to larger organizations to help your ball get rolling.
Great, thanks, Hago. And just to add to that as well, so even though Julie's example is about a conservation area, a lot of the learning from Bannister House and others is applicable. Also, if you do live in a rural area and you are wanting to look into this in a little bit more detail, have a look at the Rural Community Energy Fund. So they're offering up to £20,000 in grants at the moment around feasibility in rural areas. So that's an extra piece of support for you. One of the other popular questions, Rick, how long have I got? 2 minutes?
One more, yeah, a couple of minutes. Thanks.
Okay, so heat projects, I won't go into other than to say some examples are Springbok Cooperative, have a look at them. They've done a really nice project with it's called Care Assure, so with a charity to help their heating bills, and also Green Fox is another one. Does anyone have anything quickly on heat to interject? I think Repowering was trying to develop a heat project in London, but I know was having difficulties with some of the mayor's air quality standards.
Yeah, I mean, I think, can you hear me? Mike, you're the heat man. Well, why don't you hit it? If you want me to say what we're doing, I can.
Not really heat, I'm afraid, no. Electricity.
Okay, well,
yeah.
Repowering has been working on an anaerobic digester over in Loughborough, next to two of its first projects on Loughborough Estate, and so that I cut out there for a second. It looks like I froze myself. So there's two projects that were solar projects, and we were looking with at an area about doing anaerobic digestion. And as Emma highlighted, there were issues around resolving air quality. But, I think we're on the road to getting there. That's the other thing I think is important to say. It's a journey. Not one of these projects just came off swiftly. And that's why I think it's good to go dig deep down into your roots of what is important to your community. We have a massive waste issue in London, particularly in that area. So there was a huge amount of waste that we could use. So generating gas and was great for a cooking school in that area. So we've tried to put together a space for that. And also there's a whole gardening community that works there. So we wanted to have the biodigestate for them. So in the grand scheme of things, it was really about coming together and addressing that. And yes, there's always issues. And Emma, we are still working with them, but we'll get there.
No, you definitely will. If anyone can, I'm sure you can. There was a question about any courses. So I think on future energy learning, there's a course called Governing Future Energy Systems, and that's really nice. That has a chapter on community energy as well, which I'll send a link to Rick to circulate afterwards. Just in the spirit of time, have Chris or Mike, having had a look at the questions, is there anything else you'd just like to add or respond to?
No, about ecology being important, which I thoroughly agree with, and I've responded to that on the chat.
Great. Chris?
I've responded to a few myself that came through to me. But yeah, I think I think the majority of them have been answered now. I think I was just going to add on heat projects. I know Plymouth Energy Community are currently looking at doing heat and energy as a service by integrating heat pumps and solar PV on social housing. But that's kind of all I have on heat projects at the moment.
We're just developing our website, actually. There's a new how-tos section, and I think our map has just gone live, so it won't have everything on there yet, but we've got filters now, so you can look at different types of projects. So if you're particularly interested in hydro or heat, you should be able to select that, but it has only gone live this week, so there might still be some tweaks needed.
Emma, thank you so much, Emma. Let me just, if I can, try and wrap up.
Sure.
I think what's very clear is that community energy delivers a lot more than just kilowatt hours and zero carbon emissions. It's also delivering on stronger, more resilient communities. And we've heard about how it does that in a number of different ways. And I think this is especially important for our economic and social recovery and for our desire to build back better. So as you've heard, if you're a member of a community that doesn't have a community energy project, then please get in touch with the people that are running the kinds of initiatives that you've heard about, or directly with Emma, so that you can take that next step. If you represent a council and you have a community energy group in your local area, then do support them more, as they in turn will support you in this transition. I'd like to thank all our guests for their time and for their insights. It has been very insightful and very interesting to hear from each of you and from these different perspectives, and to hear that the real common thread that runs through this around community empowerment. And I'd like to leave you with a quote from Meg Wheatley. There is no power for change greater than a community discovering what it cares about. Thank you.